let's go. Stefan, you can go ahead and ask the question.
Hello. Yes, let's say I've quite a bit of sympathy for a lot of parts, lots of parts of this story. So I'm curious about one thing. I'm curious about this. Have you now actually done an acquisition? And the other part is, the part that I always find tricky about these things is what was your thinking? How did you come up with a reasonable number? And I'm always, you have to. I know you said, oh, I need funding for, this many months of devs and this many devs, but that's a completely separate question from the value of the company, or the value that you're going to add to the market, because especially at this point in the game, you don't know actually what your product is worth. And obviously you had to come up with some numbers. So I'm just curious, what was your process there?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Yeah, so they did the acquisition. That was last month. So this was like the first month that we are now like a new entity. The deal was basically they put in capital into the business for 51% ownership, but I remain on at 49% equity shareholder, and I don't get any money out. So basically what I get is 49% of a business that's hopefully going to be worth a lot more before the acquisition. So that was kind of the deal. From a funding perspective, I've paid kind of like, I like to pay attention to like the whole VC world. And because I was in finance for a long time, I understand like a bit more from a fundamental, like a company fundamental perspective from portfolio management, like what makes sense. Not necessarily the Silicon Valley like hype train that like builds up massive valuations that people cash out on, which is effectively like a bit of a giant Ponzi scheme. Like I was fundamentally against like doing the Ponzi scheme part. My idea was always to actually like do an indie hacker project, but the deal came along and I just thought like, do you know what, it's worth the experience of working with shareholders. It's worth the experience of dealing with like capital allocation and shareholders agreements and all this kind of stuff. Like I think the experience is worth it long term, even though I'm giving up like effective ownership. So I can always just do another project in 10 years or 5 years or however long like it takes to do another thing. So the number was like reasonable. It's like, if you're going to try to create a company and get funding for it, you need to come with like, what's the ask? And the ask is like, I need cash for what I need cash for. I don't want to get as much money as possible. And to be honest, there's so much capital floating around right now. If you have a good idea with potential to actually make money, you'll get bombarded with capital. It's actually ridiculous. Like every single one of my friends that I knew was working on some kind of project 6 months ago, who was like sort of doing this one thing on the side, and like it wasn't making money, and this thing didn't have clients, and this idea, all of their shit got acquired. Like all of their stuff has been bought, funded. Like the crypto market is going ridiculous. Like if you're building anything that there's like capital flowing in from the States, like you can't believe. So I was just like, okay, what's reasonable? Like I don't need 10 million rand. Like like I could probably go and get it, you know, if I had like, I could probably like reach out to connections in Silicon Valley and be like, this is my idea, and pitch the shit out of it. I know people that literally got funded for, this one guy 6 years ago got funded for £500,000 based on wireframes of an idea of an app. For 1%, no, 5% of the company, 5% of the company for that amount of money. So you can do it, but then what? What are you going to do? You've got all this freaking capital. You have to spend it. Like, it's not reasonable. Like for me, I just want to be down to earth. It's like, what can I actually do? Like, if you could give me like the minimum amount of money to actually make some reasonable use of it, what's the least amount of money? Not the most. That was my mentality.
Cool, thanks. Does that answer your question, Stefan?
I'd rather just let it go. I can follow up with 20 questions, but I'd rather give other people a chance.
Cool. Mo.
Oh, right.
What's your question?
I want to talk marketing. So you mentioned that a couple of people or a couple of businesses reached out to you. And so was there a marketing process behind that? or in fact, how did you get your product up there? Was there a strategy to say, well, this is what I'm gonna do to sort of let people know that there's this thing I'm doing, check it out?
Yeah, so what we did is almost all of the success we had was just personal connections, like knowing somebody. Like, for example, the co-working space that we're willing to incubate my idea, it was because I was based at that co-working space. Like, I met the owner, we had like friendly, like lots of chats. Like, it's like, okay, I've got this idea. I spoke to him face to face, like just before COVID. It's like, let's do it, you know, like, cool. Like, if then like parallel to that, like I tried to get in at like a different co-working space. They wouldn't even respond to my email. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know if this is just a South African thing. Obviously, it applies globally, but I think South African business is like more especially like that. It's like, what kind of connection do you have with somebody that like is just a friendly kind of like, oh, by the way, let's do it like this. Because if you try the front door, there's lots of policy and flipping stuff you have to do. So that was like the business to business approach, which I decided to like mostly focus on. It's like, what partners are going to get me into these businesses? From a client-facing side, B2C, I put on Google Ads and I just optimized the hell out of that. Just my budget was like 200 Rand a day. So it's like not a lot of cash, and just like try to like really push that. Some social media stuff, and then like a little bit of events, like, okay, cool. Like who's somebody that's like kind of in the community, but not like all out, just kind of like a little bit like light touching here and there. And apparently I got into some list somewhere that this guy who phoned me from this company that acquired me, like got my name randomly off a list from somebody that said, hey, by the way, speak to these guys. So yeah, it's like, it's a lot of luck and like kind of like just randomness, you know, like there wasn't a particularly grand strategy.
Thanks, Mo. Sarah, what's your question?
Yeah, I'm just hearing you say that it sounds like your team has been expanding quite quickly. So from my perspective as a junior, I was wondering, yeah, what you found was the best way to get people into your code and into your project.
Yeah, the best way is to basically like say, here's the GitHub, and then here's what I want you to do. Like, what I want you to do is like get the front end to like do this thing, and then like you figure it out. Like I'll hold your hand on something specific if you come back to me and be like, okay, cool, James, help me with this thing, and I'll get like as in-depth as you want. But what I learned just from our own personal experiences is you can like watch video tutorials, you can like do online courses, you can do all this stuff. But honestly, the most I ever learned is like, I want to achieve something. I've got a vision of how I want it to work, and you figure out how to get there. And that's actually more like real life, because in real life, somebody's not going to hold your hand and do a tutorial with everything in the code base when you get to a new company. They're going to be like, James, I want this feature done, and here's the sprint, and here's your card, and you know, now you've got points that you have to like burn or whatever. And it's like, okay, so this is what you need to do. Like, as long as they painted the vision good, like, how do you get there? So practice that. Like, get really good with Stack Overflow. Get like your Google search needs to be like your number one like go-to tool before you start like putting fingers on keyboard for code. So like the process of how you like go about learning something is a continuous thing. Like if you've been doing coding for 10 years, I think the only difference between a junior and somebody that's been doing this for 10 or 15 years is the balance between Google versus actually coding. And it's like, it's not a big difference. It'll be like 90% Google, 10% coding initially. And when you're senior, it'll be like maybe 60-40. No, I'm joking. No, it'll probably be better than that. That's what I suspect.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Tom, what's your question?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks so much for this talk. It was really, really interesting. So my question involves, like throughout the talk, you gave us some really interesting observations. You had these like insane oscillations in your like work output. So you started working off insane hours, and then you burnt out, had a break for a week, and came back to something more sort of, you know, maybe more reasonable. But I'm just interested in how you manage that uncertainty of like not knowing whether you're going to succeed or fail. And if you had to do something like this again, what would you do differently?
That's a great question. So for me, my fundamental, like, overarching premise of why I was doing this was because I was pivoting from finance in a career that I had achieved like a relative amount of success in, into technology and development. So what I needed to do is learn, gain experience, gain competency, and like get skills, like develop my skills. So effectively what I've done is I've used the resources that I accumulated from finance and was willing to risk all of it, or like most of it, to fund myself to learn as quickly and as much as possible about developing technology in business. And I thought that trade-off was worth it, because I could have spent that money going back to university and like actually getting like comp sci degree or something. It would have cost the same. So like if I'm going to like spend money on a expensive degree or spend that money trying to start a startup, I think I'd come away more experienced and with better knowledge spending the money on a startup. So that was like my overarching premise. So for me, the success thing wasn't as much like I was successful all the way along because I was successfully learning. I was successfully gaining skills at every step of that way. So that was my trade-off. It wasn't like life or death, where if I don't make this company a success, then what I've done is not successful. That was like the mindset.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, are there any other questions? Anyone else have a question?
There's one
For the
question
one?
in chat here. Maybe it came through in the first round, so I'll answer that. Is there any hardware on premises? I assume premise is premises. So yeah, basically, if that's the question, then the only hardware is like our laptops. Everything's in the cloud, like 100%. Yeah, just Google Cloud, hosted in Berlin. That's it. Boom.
I've
Yeah,
got a,
Wesley. Sorry, thanks, Kevin, for that. Maybe let's just take another round of questions. So Wesley, I've got Wesley. Rowan, do you want to ask something?
Yeah.
Okay, Yaku.
Yeah, Rowan, I have very much to speak for my elders. You can go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Wesley.
okay, Wesley says I must go first. So I'll ask.
Okay.
I mean, like James, you mentioned that there's a lot of money out there, and you just pitch an idea and you get money sort of showered on you. Okay, maybe not in those words, but just wondering, like, sort of the maturity of the product that you think or would recommend before you even go pitch it to someone, because you mentioned that you knew someone or heard of someone that got £500,000 just for wireframes. What would you recommend if you had another if you could do it all over? Would you actually have looked harder for opportunities to pitch your idea with a less mature product, or would you or you're happy the way it worked out, basically?
Oh yeah, so that's actually great, because I didn't answer somebody else's like similar question on that. So just first touching on like, would I do it over again? What would I do differently? The one lesson I would say, like, generally, like everything I do in life, like no regrets, like just that's your stuff. Any single regret you have is like baggage. So why carry baggage? Like, I'm a digital nomad. Like, I've got a laptop and I've got like 2 suitcases. Like that's what I do. Like, I sold all my stuff when I left financial services, and that weight off your shoulders is amazing. And it's the same thing, like every single regret you carry in your life is just like weight, it's like baggage. Like, so I'm just like free, like I want to be able to surf and like travel the world. Like, that's like like, so no, I don't have regrets. But the one big lesson I did learn is like, and this is like a personal trait that came through in this whole business, is like, learn to let go a little bit quicker than what you think you should. When you should let go, this is just my personality. I tend to hold on, and like I tend to let the thing like fail first before cutting it off, because it's going to fail. And that's not generic advice, because often you should just hold on. Maybe you're the type of person that quits too quickly. So it depends on your own personality, but like, know thyself, and then like realize that. And that was like something I need to work on. It's like, you see this thing's fading, like just cut it off. Like it's better for you, it's better for them, do that. On the funding thing, it's like, don't get like worked into the whole Silicon Valley like hype train. Like this is my approach. It's like, what makes sense? Just like what makes sense? Like I don't want to like have some wireframe idea that like solves for like £1 million, because ultimately it's like, what have I gained knowledge-wise and experience for that? I've sold some giant, like I've made like a great sale. That's what effectively you've done. And I did that in financial services. I'm good at selling. I can convince people to buy my stupid idea if I thought it was a dumb idea and I just wanted money from it. That's not the issue. If that's what you're trying to do, get really good at wireframes and like learn to sell. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to like really build technology, and I'm trying to be reasonable with my money so I can have like a good business. And the business means like profit and loss, you know, like with the money that's coming in, I need to make more profits than what it's costing me monthly that I have to now burn from this huge capital like thing. I'd rather have a profitable business in a year than get like £1 million of funding and like never make a profit, because I'm just constantly like raising more seed rounds to scam more investors out of their cash. Sorry, that's just my personal take on it.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I've got another question. Like, so you quit your your job. Is that something you'd recommend for everyone? But
yes,
also
everyone must quit their job.
No, on a more serious note.
Except you, Nolene and Marcel.
Oh, are they working for you?
Yes.
So look, just in terms of what advice would you give for people who like just have financial commitments, like, you know, but still want to like start something? I don't know, like, how would you go about that? Because they can't quit their job.
Yeah, it's your responsibilities. You know, you have to balance that out in your life, and like it's kind of like there's pros and cons. You know, I'm fortunate because of my position and like where I am in life that I can do this kind of stuff. But if I had a wife and kids, for example, it could have been a different story. Because I'm prepared to go and live under a bridge if I have to. If I'm completely out of cash, I need to like, you know, do whatever I need to. Like literally, I'll do that. Like it's fine. It's like I don't have any qualms about like a certain type of lifestyle and whatever. It's like I don't mind. Like as long as I'm alive and I'm able to like keep going from there. And yeah, like maybe I'll tell my proper life stories sometimes, but like I was kind of there like at some points, you know, like I was like I grew up like really like not well off, you know. So I think for me, I've seen it and it's not an issue for me. But with those financial commitments, it's like what's the trade-off? You know, if you're like, I'm just thinking like, if this were to happen and I had family, like how much hardship can you put on your family to potentially do something that you feel strongly about? And for me, the trade-off, or not necessarily a trade-off, but like the gut instinct for me is like, do what I want to do. Like always just do what you want to do, because fundamentally there's something subconscious telling you that this is what you want to do. And you can deny that voice and you can like put it down based on logic and like prefrontal cortex, like processing. But ultimately, like that thing is communicating to you from a deeper place. And if you want to like take care of your kids and you want to like make sure your wife is happy, then that's what you want to do. But if you can like let them go like with one meal less a week, you know, and then like, but you can like chase your dreams, like, what do you want more? I don't know. I don't know if that helps.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I'm done. I mean, as in next person. Thank you, James.
Keep feeding your wife and children, right? Next one is Wesley.
Yeah, James, I must say you a really good narrator. I think that skill in itself, I think it's probably served you well. Yeah, thanks, Rowan, for stealing the question of, you know, for someone that has really serious commitments. Yeah, so James, I would just like to know, man, just in terms of you know, the literature and the books, like what books have you read so far that has kind of or profoundly impacted your journey so far?
Okay, so I'll do this in chronological order from the earliest books, but like there's been a couple of things that where I read or like listened to, where I was like you have like those moments. That's like epiphanic, right? Like there's an epiphany moment. And the first one was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I think. So it's got like this reputation of being a self-help book, and like there's a whole like industry around it. But just when I read that, I was like, okay, so there's a framework with which you can view kind of like success. And it's the same thing as a lot of these personality assessments. It could be like mostly bullshit, but at least it's a framework that you can start working on, and like having the conversation with yourself. Like, okay, like you're either working for someone else, you're working for yourself, which means you're selling your time, you being like a shareholder, or like in a business with partners, or like you're an investor. And if you get to the investor level, like this, it's like a framework, like just like different ways of comparing things. So that's a great book. And then I read like a lot of like all like those inspirational type books, As a Man Thinketh, you know, like all that kind of stuff, like Napoleon Hill and like all that kind of stuff. So that was all good, like during my like peak like finance days. And then, but the next like big like epiphany kind of thing that I read, which is more recently, is like re-looking at my faith, to be honest, and like reconnecting with like the Bible, like as like maybe cliche or not, or like sometimes it can make people be like a bit cringy or whatever. Like literally that's like profoundly affected like why I'm doing this. And it's like, it's not just for myself. It's like, there's like a good purpose, for like a foundational purpose for what you're doing. And then lastly, the last epiphany I had was listening to the talk on a podcast called Lex Friedman. He interviewed Stephen Wolfram. Okay, if you watch that podcast, like literally, like I listened to that thing. It's about 4.5 hours long, and like the matrix revealed itself. Like I understood like the fundamental nature of reality, and I was like, okay, shit, like things started like fitting in. But also it was because I just completed a complexity science course for 3 months, and it was like complexity science, like physics, like set theory, graphs. Like I was like, okay, cool, like things are starting to make sense. So there you go.
Very interesting. Thank you, Wesley. Yaku, what's your question?
Hi, James.
Hey.
So from a startup perspective, so I assume it's been plus minus 7 months now from starting point to where you're now.
Yeah.
And like I'm in a startup with a colleague or a friend of mine, and an initial idea is a little bit of your MVP, like getting it up and running, making it work. You have no idea of what it should look like. You're adding new features or scope creeps or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And in the same sentence, you're learning to code a little bit as well. It's 90% Stack Overflow, 10% development.
Yeah.
How many times have you rewritten it, or when these new, let's call them senior developers, joined your force, did they come and say, James, this sucks, we need to throw it all out, it's a good idea, fundamentally technology, it's broken, doesn't make sense, let's follow some solid principles, or whatever it might be?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
that is a great question. So what I did was, when I started hacking away at this thing, like hacking is like a euphemism for like making sure that my code was like as like elegant, like clean, like fundamentally good as possible. And I did that specifically because my overarching theme was like learning and like developing my skills. So I went actually overboard in like best practice, like best possible practice for my like shitty idea of how to build like a framework, to the point where I didn't even realize it, but I'd effectively built my own ORM system. Like I'd effectively like redesign like all the stuff that like kind of you can just like do yourself from first principles, just thinking about the problem and like coding a solution for it. And so there's pros and cons. Like the first thing, like it was great experience, because from scratch, like the SQL queries, like literally like writing SQL queries like hectically, and like doing all like the security like from scratch, like calls, like all those like freaking things that give you like a million headaches, like literally like going line flying, like doing all that stuff. So I'd written that code base, I don't know, it was like maybe 5,000 to 10,000 lines of like Googling like best practice, having packages, but writing the fundamental framework from scratch, from the first line of code to the end. And I think it's good, but the problem is now if you try to scale that and you try to make it extendable and you've got like a team coming in, then you can do that. You can still use that code, but you're going to have to train those guys on like your thought process and like what you were doing. And it just like slows it down a little bit. So what I did is I approached like some really good guys, like architecture design people, and they thought about it. We're like brainstorming a bit. Everyone's got their own opinions. Like the senior devs, they come in, they're like, okay, no, let's go Django and let's go React. And I was like, first of all, no and no. I'm not going to do that because I'm not using Django. I don't like the feeling of it. And like they come with all their logic. It's like, no, but it's got a built-in thing and you don't have to. I was like, Django sucks. And I don't have to explain myself. It's just, that's my freaking feeling. And that's probably why I'm self-employed. But anyway, it's like, and yeah, so like I stuck to like my gut. It's like, I like generic, like I like Python. I want it to be like simple. So I used Flask. Fast APIs based on the same thing. It's asynchronous. Like I love it. Like I love like how it looks and like how it makes you feel. And really senior guys, like 20-year experience type of guys that's worked in banks for many, many years. They said like at the end of the day, a language is a language. Like actually it's like irrelevant. But what choosing a language does is it kind of gives you a community. And think about it from that perspective. It's like a language is a culture. So if you're like an R coder, like you're probably like that kind of person, you know, if you like, you know, whatever, like let's say like front-end frameworks, like it means like you in like the web, like front-end kind of Python, it means like you kind of like there. So it's like, okay, I chose those things based on how it makes me feel. And then like, I just went with it because that's what like excites you. That's what you're interested in. That's going to give you extra like motivation and feeling to do it. Then you do it. Having said that, these seniors came in and like they found this really good template. So it's a boilerplate template that's a full stack like thing. So I can give you a little text snipe here. So Fast API, if you go to their GitHub, they've got boilerplates. So it gives you the full stack: Postgres, Vue framework, and Fast API backend. Literally, like you put in your code and it gives you the foundation that you can work on. And that's like, I don't know, 30,000 lines of code, like setup, security setup, everything set up. You just need to put in your logic and like connect it all up. So that's what we're busy doing. So we've removed to this like new code base. It's going to be completely extendable, all based on like proper framework design principles. And the other coders that I've got in, they just apply like standard processes. Okay, like this is SQL Alchemy. That's how you're supposed to do it. And it's got all the documentation you need. I don't need to now sit with them and explain to them how I thought about the solution. Just like go read the docs.
Cool, thanks, Yaku. Excellent question. So that's pretty much the end of question time. I think any burning questions? Probably take one more, maybe two. If there are any real burning questions, raise your hand. Yaku's got a follow-up question. Let's cue that. Anyone else have a follow-up question? One more, and then let's cap it there. No. All right. Yaku, just your follow-up question. Thanks.
Okay. And just by adding on this tech stack, so it goes a little bit back to what you said. You just need to know how to sell. Like my current assumption is integrating with a lot of systems and working with a lot of people or development houses. Like everything sucks. Like I look at it and I'm like, how do you run a business? Like from a technical point, this is falling apart, doesn't make sense. Like is that the same claim that you make? Like you just need to know how to sell your wireframes, even if it's just
it depends on your definition of success, man. Like honestly, like I don't take that approach. Like I want my stuff to be good because it makes me feel good and that's what I want to do. I don't want to sell some like junky thing to like make some cash and then like con the next guy. So, but what you're saying is true. It's out there. It's like so many people are doing that because like, why not? You can do it. And we have the fortunate position of being technically like sound and astute, so we can do stuff that the outside world has no idea whether this thing is good or bad. And I've seen it now with a few people who have founded companies and they've got no technical skills. It's called a non-technical founder. They might have a good business idea. They've got some like business practices. They got somebody else to write their code. It's junk. It doesn't work. It's like, it's gonna look like it works, but then fundamentally it's got problems. You're not gonna be able to grow it. You can't like create an API out of it. It's just rubbish. Sorry, yeah, but it's like, I just keep thinking back to like Steve Jobs, right? Like Steve Jobs went like ridiculous with his design, like his hardware. Like he made the motherboard like look pretty, like he moved the components around so that if somebody like took the computer apart, which is very hard to do with the Mac stuff, it's like would actually look at it and be like, wow, this is cool. Like he went to some factory where they like manufacture the stuff, and he like got them to like stop the whole process because he wanted the machines like painted certain colors, like because like he thought that the colors would like be really good looking for the machines in a factory. So that's like overboard. But my approach is like, if you feel strongly about it, then stick to your principles, stick to your commitment, because ultimately like this is your approach. So if your approach is to be a solid engineer and to do it properly, then do it and like be justified in that, and then make it work around you. Like, you know, sell that. You know, don't sell scammy